Good morning, everybody. This is Mark Arrington, Mark the Mortgage Marine, and Jennifer Richardson with another episode of A Cup of Coffee in the Neighborhood. So, we just pretty short one today. We want to talk about pretty much the ultimate house hack that you can probably think of if you can do it and if you can swing it, if it makes sense for you. And that's a house hack of essentially buying a duplex, living in one side, and then renting out the other one.
Right.
So you said you had a client that was kind of interested in doing this?
Yeah, so I had a client that brought this up and it made a lot of sense. So I'd love to get your feedback on it. But when you're purchasing a primary residence, my understanding is you're able to put down a little bit less as opposed to, or actually a lot less,
Yes.
as opposed to an investment property, which is typically 25 to 30% down depending on scenarios and such. So that seems like a great possibility for somebody that if they purchase a duplex primary residence, if they qualify for everything, putting that smaller amount down. Is that right?
Right. Well, so,
Laying out the other side.
so here's the deal, right? So if it's a primary residence, the minimum contribution that you may be able to put down, VA 100%, USDA 100% financing, FHA you have to put down 3.5%. Conventional you can either have to put down 3% or 5%, just depending on if it's your first house, if you fall into certain programs or whatnot. Then from your primary residence, it goes to second home, right? Second home is 10% down, but right now, like you're gonna get destroyed on points with a second home for the most part. The only good thing about a second home is you can still get up to a higher percentage of seller concessions. And then you go to investment properties. Investment properties start at 15% down. And then obviously the interest rate gets better the more money that you put down. But for what you're talking about as far as doing a house hack, essentially how it can work out, and I'll talk about it for VA and then I'll talk about it for FHA or conventional. And this works for all of those programs. So you go in, you buy a duplex and you live in one side. So you occupy one side within 60 days, which checks the block that you've occupied it as your primary residence within 60 days of closing. And then you can rent out the other side. Right, so then you can use the rental income from the other side to pay off the overall mortgage, and then you can actually pay off your mortgage a lot faster. And you can get some rental income coming in with only having to live on one side. So if it makes sense for you, it makes sense for you.
Are there any guidelines on as far as how you rent that? I mean, they can do short-term, long-term, mid-term.
You can do whatever you
as
want.
long as there's no
because you're
that restricts it, right?
And you're not using. So if you're buying it as a second home all down to primary, you're not using rental income to qualify for the most part. Like I'm always gonna just count the whole payment against you. I'm not gonna give you border income. Some programs allow that, but for the most part, I'm gonna just count the whole principal, interest, taxes, and insurance (PITI) against your debt to income ratio. And your debt to income ratio is strictly just how much money you make, how much debt, and the house that you have. But what that allows, especially for my VA guys, right? The ones that are you're gonna go to station to station. It allows you to go in, pick up a duplex, which are very hard to find. There's not a lot of duplexes at all. They want to start building all these condos, which are condos totally different. But a duplex, you can live on one side, you can rent out the other. You can do this up to a quadruplex, right?
Really?
So residential mortgage is considered anything from 1 to 4 units, right? This is depending on how they're classified or whatever else. You start getting into condos and stuff, it gets a little bit different. But if it's actually like a quadruplex and that's how it is titled and deeded, then you can actually buy it and just live in one of those units, rent out the other 3 units, and that satisfies a primary residence clause.
So what determines that, other than how it's deeded, I guess? Are there restrictions on access into the property, like 2 different doors is a duplex, question mark?
A duplex is titled as such.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't, at the end of the day, if there's one door there, it's not gonna get titled as a duplex. So we're always gonna go back to what it's titled and deeded as. If you just go put another back door in or something, we're not gonna care. Now, if it's a manufactured home, you put a back door in there, we can't loan to it. So you just change the entire structure of that manufactured home. So that's definitely a no-go. But as far as how it is titled and deeded, that's how we're going to lend against it. Nice. So, and that's a good thing about VA too, because now, single sergeant, right? BH or not BH, you go buy a duplex out in town, you're essentially living rent-free. And then whenever you move away after a year or so, after you meet the primary residence clause,
right?
Then you got yourself a rental property for 0% down, and interest rates are always going to be better on a primary residence. Why do you think? I know why, but why do you think it is?
I mean, it seems like a risk factor. You're not going to let your primary residence go.
Right. Yeah. You have to have shelter for your family. Right. So ultimately, like, everything is going to be based off of risk. So like higher risk, higher interest rate for the most part. So a primary residence is usually going to have a lower interest rate because they understand that your family needs shelter. So you're going to like sell the car, you're going to do everything you can to keep your roof over your head, vice walking away from like a second residence or an investment property. Investment property or second residence, they have higher down payments because of the risk, because they know that people will walk away from them and then the bank wants to get their money back if they can flip it.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. That's super informative. Well, I got to go find some duplexes. So
She's going to go find some duplexes, and I mean, maybe I'll try and invest in some,
Yeah,
but
if
it
you
can't
want to
be
buy one, I can help you.
can't be a primary residence for me anymore. It's not going to work out. So
Right.
yeah, it has to make sense though. Just understand it has to make sense. You're not going to be able to do like, cool, I'm living in a 3,000 square foot home with my family, and all of a sudden I want to go buy a duplex that's 1,000 square feet. It's just, it has to still make sense. So this is one of those things that, like, you know, if you're one of the single cats out there, like, it makes sense for you to do something like this. Now, if you own a couple houses already, and like, if it doesn't make sense, a lender's just not going to do it. So it has to make sense. But other than that, hopefully that was informative. Hopefully we have some people that are trying to do some house hacks in the future. It's a good way to, set up future proceeds from real estate. I mean, it's just great for your family, especially for the VA guys, the young VA guys. I tell every single one of them, dude, I'd buy a house every freaking duty station you go to, because you're going to be able to have a future rental property.
Definitely.
But other than that, I hope that we catch all of y'all next week. Pool's coming in.
Pool's coming in. Yeah, they painted the pool house. It looks really good.
Pool house is white.
It is white. I think it looks great. They are about to throw down some concrete, and hopefully we'll be in there swimming by the end of summer.
Yeah. It looks small from the outside. When you walk up to it, you're like, okay, it's not a.
I think it'll work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, you always want it to be bigger, but it is what it is. All right. Well, I hope all of y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next.